Good evening, everybody. It's 9:30 on the East Coast, 6:30 on the West Coast. On a Monday, it must mean it's time for your weekly Claim to Jane live stream. James, how are you doing on this New Year's Eve? 1.5 days away from 2025.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I guess this is our last stream for the year, so
I
I'm glad we were
mean,
able to. Yeah,
unless we do a miraculous one tomorrow for some reason, but
yeah. No, I don't think we will be doing that, but
yeah,
in our normal cadence and rhythm, this will be our last stream of the year. So yeah, I'm glad we're able to connect one more time before we wrap up
yeah,
the
absolutely.
year.
Glad to be here, ready to go, ready to rock and roll. I have things queued up and I
Oh,
know
wow,
last couple of streams I've been pretty dry on things to talk about, and we manage,
wow,
but today I've got stuff.
wow. You're even rubbing your hands, almost in a villainous kind of way.
Oh yeah,
Unleash your evil plans upon the world, that kind of a thing going on,
that's the
That's
plan.
good.
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
Yeah,
Yeah, my master plan is coming to fruition as we
yeah,
speak.
yeah. Uh, I think, yeah, I mean, we've been off for a couple weeks. I was in Utah visiting family, so I didn't ever got a chance to really settle down. All my cool stuff was in my villainous lab in LA, so
Mm-hmm.
now I'm
Mm-hmm.
back, so I can stream over here and we can animate while we talk about whatever evil plans you have. It's kind of I don't mean to put you in the evil category. For all I know, you could be chaotic neutral or whatever D&D term you want to fall under. But
No, I'm
it's
happy with evil. I'm happy with evil.
okay. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean they
yeah,
do have
yeah.
the cooler stuff. They tend to. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, generally, I have all the better toys. Villains always have the great
Yeah,
toys.
yeah, they always do. So, but yeah, I'll jump into where we left off last week. Well, not last week, 2 weeks ago. Um, all right. Where we last left off, I was working on Calamity landing on the warhog. So we
Mm-hmm.
have some of that warhog animated here doing the roar, and he's going to turn to off screen and then run into the next shot. So I got to work on Calamity kind of settling onto him, and then the tail flopping down, and a little bit of reaction as the warhog roars. So I'll
All
be doing
right,
that tonight while we kind of hang out.
all right, all right. Well, geez, you take your pick. Movies or video games? I got stuff on both.
Okay, so actually, I'm hoping that you may have already, in our off time, I was hoping that maybe you had a chance to go watch Nosferatu
Yes,
in the
indeed.
theaters because I
Indeed I
want to see
did.
if it because I'm gonna so for Amit and I, she doesn't like these scary movies, and
Hmm.
Nosferatu falls in that category. So I'm actually off for a couple of days until the studio opens back up on my side. So I might sneak away and go catch a matinee of it. Is it worth seeing it in the theaters?
You would be absolutely remiss and you would hate yourself in the future if you did not immediately go see this movie.
Okay, that's a glowing review.
Yes.
Okay.
Robert Eggers remains one of my favorite filmmakers. He knocked it out of the park with Nosferatu. Just an
Okay.
absolutely great movie in its own right and an absolute love letter to the source material. Every actor in it is just stellar. Lily
Mhm.
Rose Depp, in particular, delivers a performance that I was not expecting at all. Bill Skarsgård remains terrifying and delightfully menacing.
Uh-huh.
And you wouldn't even recognize him as Nosferatu if you didn't know that it was him playing the role.
Okay.
Um, just a remarkably good movie. I was very happy to go see it on Christmas Day. Couldn't have imagined a better way to spend an afternoon than watching a sort of classic throwback to old school horror, right? It is violent, but everything is very highly stylized. So the violence is almost in silhouette at times. Um,
Uh-huh.
um, but it is violent but it's not there's not a lot of jump scares. It's not gore porn. It's just an old school kind of pot boiler horror where the dread and the sense of fear comes from sort of this oppressive menace that you can feel always at the edges of the screen.
Okay.
Um, I don't think Amita would be too. I don't think she would struggle with it too much, even if you aren't a big fan of horror. It is scary, but they don't
Mm.
rely on sort of the standard tropes of horror movies, which is like loud sudden noises or
Yeah, yeah,
just excessive
sure.
amounts of violence on the screen, right? It's
Hmm.
violent and it's scary, but it doesn't feel gratuitous at any point during the movie.
Okay.
It was great. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And then, you know, on a lark, the day before on Christmas Eve, I went and saw Lord of the Rings: The War of the Rohirrim,
Okay.
which is that cartoon that Warner Brothers did about the writers of Rohan in the the early days of the Third Age, and that
Hmm.
was pretty entertaining. It was not as good as Nosferatu, but it was still fun. It was pretty accurate, at least to my limited research on the topic, to the book. So it fills in the blanks of things that weren't talked about
Hmm.
in any capacity by Tolkien or or his son. Um, and it was really it was fun. It was a good cartoon. Um, it was a little bit by the books, by the numbers. It was pretty predictable. Kind of knew what was going to happen an hour before it happened, kind of thing.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
that be that as it may, it was a fun time. I enjoyed watching it.
Do you think that the anime style suited the particular subject matter for Lord of the Rings?
I thought
Like
it
it
was
was kind of, it's fine.
yeah, I thought it was fine. It didn't bother
Hmm.
me, but I mean, to be fair, yeah, I've watched plenty of anime. It's all pretty
Yeah,
normalized to me, so
yeah,
I
yeah.
watch it, and it doesn't really, it doesn't really strike me as anything unfamiliar or exotic because I've seen enough of that sort of particular animation style.
Hmm.
Um, would it have looked better in a more traditional Western style? I don't know. I honestly don't know. It was very gorgeous. It was a pleasure to look at, despite any uh, shortcomings as far as the story is concerned. It was
Hmm.
you know, it was fine in terms of the visuals. I had no complaints over the look of the movie.
Okay. So I mean, as we talk about the Lord of the Rings or any of these movies, when I saw the commercials for this and the advertising for this, I just felt like it was pretty much just another license slash cash grab to do something with Lord of the Rings before their license runs out. So they need to do this because they don't want the license to run out, kind of a thing. Very similar to what Sony does with Spider-Man or whatever. They have to always
Sure.
go back. And so I felt like it was kind of, I just felt like it wasn't genuine passion to release this movie. And so I was approaching it from with a little bit of skepticism. And I haven't even watched it. And you and I are we're both guilty of this a lot where we prejudge something from a distance without even looking at it. That is reassuring that it is good. That part's great. I don't know if I'm compelled to want to go see it in the theater for this particular movie myself,
No.
especially from what you've told me.
Yeah.
Versus Nosferatu, I will definitely. I like I said, I think my plan will be to go catch a matinee tomorrow, and check it out, and then I'll give you my follow-up review maybe next week or
In the
something.
in the new year. Yeah,
In
in
the
the
new
new
year.
year.
Yeah, yeah.
Still
Um,
crazy that I can't believe it's 2024 is coming to a close.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty crazy. But with the Lord of the Rings installment, it's the same. It's the same critique I always kind of throw out when it comes to Hollywood kind of stuff, which is they go to prequels because they have no ideas to go forward, and they're too scared to go forward, and so we've already seen what we already know what happens. I don't. There's no. It's the same thing with Andor or any of these Star Wars prequel movies. Like I always the same issue. There's no. I don't worry about the protagonist ever. I know the protagonist, he or she will live, and I don't know if I really want to get
Mm-mm.
invested in like how they got to the process of how they lived. When I care about other characters that are forward. That probably is limited thinking on my part, but that's just where I'm at with it. Yeah, and you and I have kind of talked about this before. I mean, I think you enjoy it purely for the moment, right? And you just enjoy it for what it is. I wish I could do that. I
Yeah, for
just
the
can't.
journey, right? Like what the
Yeah,
destination is, and it's
yeah,
yeah. But your criticism is perfectly valid. I will say this: there
uh-huh.
isn't a single character in this movie that is in any of the Lord of the Rings movies, the
Yeah,
Hobbit or
it's so far in the
yeah,
past, right? Yeah,
and
yeah.
the protagonist, they call her Hela,
Mm-hmm.
is a character. So if you look at the family tree on the Encyclopedia of Arda, which is sort of the main wiki
Yeah.
for Lord of the Rings, Helm, who is the king of Rohan during this era, had two sons that are named and are characters in this movie, and a daughter who is unnamed in any of Tolkien's writings on the Lord of the Rings. It's just apparently at some point mentioned that Helm had a daughter, and that's it.
Uh-huh.
Um, this movie's about that unnamed daughter, right? And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
there isn't, you really don't know what's going to happen to her because Tolkien doesn't write about her at all, right?
Yeah.
He writes
Yeah.
about it, about Helm's sons. He writes about how Helm and his sons die. He doesn't go into any detail about how they die. So the movie fills in the blanks there. Whether or not it's canon, who knows, who cares? Um, but the daughter, the unnamed daughter figure in Tolkien's original writings, is completely open to
Mm-hmm.
storytelling. And so I thought, after, so I didn't know anything. My interest, I like the people of Rohan, but I never really did much research into their past, as you do like Gondor
Mm-hmm.
or the elves or all these, or the wizards and things of that nature. And
Mm-hmm.
Tolkien didn't really spend a huge amount of time on their past either, quite frankly. And so it's pretty light. And so I really didn't know that much about the writers in the early days of the Third Age. And so I went into this movie pretty blind, not knowing how much of it was from the source material, how much was it, was new material, et cetera, et cetera. And it turns out that it's almost entirely new material based on scant writings from the source
Mm-hmm.
material.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, after researching it and sort of filling in the blanks, et cetera, I thought they
Mm-hmm.
did a great job, quite frankly, in terms of staying true to the mythos of the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's writings about the
Mm-hmm.
Middle Earth,
Mm-hmm.
but also creating something wholly new and playing around with the playing around with the stories, playing around with the characters and the world, and creating something that felt of the world but new. So it was a win for me. Was it a classic? Was it a one for the ages? No, but it was enjoyable watching, and I would
Mm-hmm.
recommend if people are fans of Lord of the Rings to absolutely go check it out.
So it's worthy of being installed into the Hall of Fame of Lord of the Rings
Look,
media,
if
in
the
your opinion,
Hobbit
right?
if the Hobbit is a part of the canon, then this
I
definitely
don't.
is high enough quality to be considered a part of the canon in terms of the cinematic universe.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the asterisk because I don't consider Hobbit part of the canon at all. That thing was awful. Um, but I mean, but the books, of course, the book is amazing,
Yeah,
but the movies
yeah.
are. I was just pretty much what I just did, just grab my forehead and just kind of
Fair.
just roll my eyes at the screen. But it sounds like this was it Rohirrim? What is
The
it?
War of the Rohirrim. Yeah.
Rohirrim, yeah. It sounds like Rohirrim might actually be better than The Hobbit, would you say?
I mean, I enjoyed it more than any of the Hobbit movies, personally. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's good to know. I'll probably wait till streaming. I don't know
Oh
if you
yeah. I went. I wouldn't
still.
go. I wouldn't waste your time in theaters. This is not something that really needs to be seen in theaters, honestly.
Yeah. Now, let's going back to Nosferatu. I like how you described the gore was as being in silhouette. That's really I feel like that's almost that's pretty genius of the director to do that because it goes back to throwback of letting the viewer imagine what's happening and you
Hmm.
don't really see anything. It's not really gruesome or just gratuitous. And that part's really cool. I like that sounds that's great. I'm looking forward to seeing it that way. And it's all black and white too, right? Are
No,
they
no,
doing
no.
it
It
or is
it
it
is.
in
It's
color?
interesting. It's very interesting. The movie is in color, but Eggers was clearly very inspired by. So at one point, and I don't know the full story of this, so I haven't done a lot of research into the original film. But the most versions that you're going to see now have been colorized in weird ways. So if you
Oh
watch
yeah.
the original 1930s version, there'll be some scenes that are very orange, very blue, right? And so there's
Hmm.
these this
Hmm.
general wash of color over various scenes and various moments. He Eggers clearly took that as an inspiration point. So the movie is in color; it's not black and white, but it uses very heavy monotone colors, color palettes for each different scene and different locations and things of that nature. Very cool. An awareness of the source material without being again a slave to the source material. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I thought it was really cool. I mean, Eggers is a phenomenal filmmaker. I mean, at this point, he's proven himself pretty clearly, and and his self-professed love for the original film, all of that comes through in Nosferatu. So, um, and it is an interesting uh obviously the original film is completely black and white, and this is a talkie, and so there
Hmm.
is a lot more dialogue and a lot more explanation about what's going on. So it's the original film is very abstract, very much left to the interpretation of the viewer, and this grounds it a little bit more. For better, for better for some people, for worse for other people. I've read a few reviews that complained that the narrative, the actual like clear narrative of the film takes away from the mystique of the original movie. I thought it was a fair criticism. I disagree. I mean, I don't disagree necessarily, but I actually really liked the fact that it was a little bit more narrative driven than the sort of abstract
Hmm.
experiment piece that the original film was. You know.
Cool. I mean, and again, to be fair, I mean, the old film, I mean, it was so early on. I mean, they were just kind of breaking ground, right? They were just kind of,
Yeah, I mean, it was in the 30s, I think.
yeah.
Well, maybe even earlier because it was obviously a silent film. 1922. So yeah, 8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was very
Yeah.
early. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah. So obviously, we're 102 years on from the release of that film.
Jesus
So,
crazy.
which is a weird thing to think about that this remake that Eggers did is based on a movie that was 102 years old. Um, which is just bonkers to me, but there you go.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun, I guess. But yeah, yeah. So I lost the thread on that question. I apologize.
It's just been a long time, as far as it's been a long time between the original and this one. So
Yeah, there
the
was
any kind of liberties is it's pretty fair game for
yeah.
considering how old it is, you know?
Um, so there was a remake of it in um, let's see, I believe there was a remake of it in 1979.
Hmm.
Um, and I have not seen that one, so I have no context for how good it was. Um, it's oh, okay, that makes sense. Um, yeah, so also very appropriately, one of my favorite character actors, Doug Jones, he played Nosferatu, Count Orlok, in the 1979 version. It was probably one of his earlier movies, if it was in '79, which I love. That's a little factoid that I'm discovering right here on this podcast. So Doug Jones, for anybody who doesn't know, he is a very talented character actor who is renowned for his monster portrayals in Guillermo del Toro films and Star Trek and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and a bunch of other stuff. He's most recently been in What We Do in the Shadows. Um,
Hmm.
just a phenomenal. His physicality is unbelievable, and
Wait, who does he play in What They Do in the Shadows?
he plays the Count, the really tall,
The,
lanky one that Guillermo kills early in season one. But that it
Okay,
turns
yeah,
out
with the
he's
sunlight and stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So he plays
Yeah, and
that.
he's got the robe on and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And he
He's like
plays
the elder statesman. He's like an
yes,
elder statesman vampire. Okay,
yes, yeah.
gotcha.
And he plays Abe Sapien in the Hellboy films, and he
Okay.
plays he plays Pan and the Hand Eye Monster in Pan's Labyrinth.
What?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
and he plays Saru in Star Trek Discovery, and he plays the big bad vampire, and I think season 2 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Hmm.
So he is just, he's a phenomenally talented actor with an amazing physicality. So discovering that he played Count Orlok in the '79 remake of Nosferatu that's pretty cool. That's a fun little discovery on my part right now.
That is pretty cool. And what a versatile actor
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
guy
just
is from what he just, that's pretty awesome. Um,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So
so
yeah, and I got his autograph once. It was pretty great.
where'd you get his autograph from? Like at a con or something?
I was living in LA at the time, and I lived in North Hollywood, and by pure chance, my wife at the time, she heard that there was this sort of macabre bookstore like a mile from our house. Um,
Hmm.
and I don't know why or how this came to pass, but Mike Mignola, famously the creator of Hellboy, amongst other things, Doug Jones, Scott Arcudi, who was the editor in chief of Dark Horse at the time. I don't remember if he is
Hmm.
still.
Hmm.
They were doing a signing of a new book that Mignola had just released, not Hellboy related. I don't remember what it was, and she heard about it and told me about it, and so I went, and I was like the third in line, and I brought an Abe Sapien action figure that I had with me, and
Hmm.
had him
Hmm.
sign it along with Scott and Mignola.
Hmm.
It was very cool. I was very happy to have that. I still have that somewhere around here. I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to dig it up someday.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I got to meet Doug Jones. It was awesome because I, again, huge fan of his. So it was really really cool to get to meet him and get his autograph.
Yeah, I mean that's what did you have any reaction when he signed your Ape Sapien action figure? Was
He's
he
just he's just a
did
really
he
cool guy who's like, oh, this is cool, and he signed it. There
Yeah,
wasn't
that's
there
hilarious.
wasn't anything like super specific about it, but
Okay, all
yeah.
right. Yeah. Sometimes celebrities will go, "Oh, wow, you still remember me from this role?" And then they kind of,
Well,
wax poetic about that type of stuff.
yeah,
But
in all fairness, I think it may have been Hellboy related. Otherwise, why would they have invited him? So I don't remember him
yeah,
being
okay.
surprised. My memory
Mm,
is hazy at this point because this was back in like 2006, right? So we're
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
18 some odd years since then.
mm-hmm.
Which is weird to think that it's been uh almost 20 years since I left LA.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so at this point, I think I'm trying to remember like what other vampire, like what other, like you just mentioned Nosferatu in the '79 that he played. Um, but other than that, did they do anything else since then? I mean, I can't remember
Well, with the
if they've done.
Nosferatu franchise in
Yeah, I
particular,
don't think so.
the
Yeah, I don't think
closest
they've done
thing
anything.
the closest thing is Shadow of the Vampire, which is a
Oh,
fictionalized exploration of the making of Nosferatu.
uh-huh.
Interestingly, the actor who plays Count Orlok in that film is portrayed by Willem Dafoe, who is in
Yeah.
Nosferatu now, the remake, which I thought was an interesting little factoid.
Hmm.
But Robert Eggers, after he worked with Defoe on The Lighthouse, has basically cast him in everything he's done. Right? He was in The Northman. Yeah, obviously he's in Nosferatu. And I just read an article today that he's already cast him in Eggers has already cast him in his next 2 projects. So clearly an actor he likes
Jeez.
to work with, and who wouldn't? Everything I've heard about Willem Dafoe is that he's an absolute pleasure to work with. So
Yeah, everything, yeah, and every movie I've ever seen him in, it never disappoints.
yeah.
It always seems like he's perfectly cast. I don't know whether that's just because he's just an adaptive actor, but there's very few that could do that. There's him, like Gary Oldman comes to mind, just recent
Mm.
CPS. Yeah, there's only a few that can do that. It's funny, I was watching, you and I don't know if we've talked about this during our stream, but we both talked about slow horses,
Yeah, yeah,
and how good one is that. And then I was watching over the holiday, Sirius Black, his role as Sirius Black, and how much different he is as the uncle of Harry
yeah,
Potter. Like it's
yeah.
just he's so fun to watch. In every role he does, he just kind of envelops himself in it.
Hmm.
And then yeah, with Willem Dafoe, Poor Things, the mad scientist guy, and that he's terrific.
And
Yeah.
then yeah, Yorgos Lanthimos brought him back for Kinds of Kindness,
Hmm.
playing equally bizarre characters in that sort of triptych of short films.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, cool. Well, I will definitely go check out Nosferatu for sure. I will check
yeah,
it out
highly
by
recommend it. Highly
tomorrow.
recommend it.
Yeah. You were also talking about, okay, now to sort of switch gears a little bit, but you're also talking about a video game, like you were
Hmm.
playing something more recently.
So Steam's winter sale is on right now. So there's a bunch of games on my wish list that were deeply discounted for $5 or less. And so I picked up a few indie games that I had not played and needed to play, and so I picked those up and played them. The
Hmm.
two most, I think, recognizable of those is The Return of the Obra Dinn,
Oh, okay.
and by the same guy who did Papers, Please, and it's a single person project. He did everything on it. And then Outer Wilds, which is a science fiction time loop kind of game, and spent a fair amount of time. I mean, I beat Oberdin, and I'm still working my way through Outer Wilds, and they
Hmm.
are very interesting games. Weirdly similar in some ways, and then vastly different in others. They're both, I would, I guess, argue adventure slash puzzle games in that you are
Hmm.
exploring a space. In the case of the Return of the Obra Dinn, it's a single ship in the 18th century. And
Hmm.
in Outer Wilds, it's an entire solar system, which you can fly between all of the planets, which is very cool.
Hmm.
Um, and you are trying to piece together what is happening in the world that you have found yourself thrust into, with no context at the start. And through your just sort of curious exploration, you begin to discover what happened, and you put in the missing pieces as you work your way through the game.
Okay.
And my short sort of one sentence review of each. I haven't beaten Outer Wilds at this point, but I've put in enough time that I have a sense of what it is. Oberdin was good. And Outer Wilds is really interesting. So the Return of the Oberdin is a really clever concept that I thought could probably use the benefit of a separate creative to smooth out some of the rough ideas on the generalized concept. I say
Hmm.
this, um, and I want to acknowledge that the fact that a single person did all of the music, did all of the art, did all of the design, wrote the story, built the mechanics around the story, programmed the whole thing top to
Jeez.
bottom is an absolute remarkable feat, right? I mean, The Return of the Oberdin is not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. Um, and the idea is that you show up on a ship that has come back to port after disappearing, and was lost at sea for quite a while. And
Hmm.
you have a magic stopwatch, not stopwatch, pocket watch that allows you to look into the past and see the final moments of someone's death. And through the course of the game, using your memories of these various deaths, your responsibility is to identify who each crew person is, um, how they died, and when, right? And
Okay.
it's a really, really clever concept. And when it works, you feel super smart. And when it doesn't work, you feel really angry. Because I played it and I got, I'd say on my own, usually I can finish. a game, I call myself an 80% gamer, meaning I can
Hmm.
usually get through 80% of a game without any trouble, and then the last 20% I beat my head against a wall or I just go to a wiki, right?
Hmm.
With the
Yeah.
Return of the Obra Dinn, I got about 40% of the way through the game and was like, I give up. I don't get it. Um,
Oh, okay.
and so I ultimately got on a wiki and just had the wiki explain to me what the logic was supposed to be. In
Hmm.
some cases, I was like, I feel like if I pushed a little harder, I could figure this out. But in most of the cases, it was like, I don't know how anybody was supposed to figure this out. Right.
Oh, is that cryptic, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of along the lines of Fez. Um,
Uh-huh.
right. A game I did enjoy, but by design, there were puzzles in it that he had like the only way anybody was going to solve it is by getting on a forum and working together with people on the internet. Right.
Oh,
Um,
man.
and so I felt that way about the Return of the Obra Dinn. I was invested enough in it that I took the time to get on an FAQ and figure out, all the missing pieces.
Hmm.
But I finished it and then immediately uninstalled it. I'll never play it again.
Well, you're that angry with
No, no,
it,
no, no.
or
I wasn't angry with it, but it was like, okay, cool. This wasn't good enough for me to want to forget it and try it again later with the more context. It was like, cool, I went through it. This was a really interesting experiment. I like the ideas. It's not good enough for me to revisit at a later date, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that took me, I put in about 6 hours into that, and that was plenty of time. Didn't want to live in that world any longer than those 6 hours. But I
Mhm.
thought it was a really clever experiment, and it was fun to be a part of it for a little bit.
Mhm.
Outer Wilds is different. The premise is you are an astronaut on a strange solar system that is remarkably small, and they don't bother explaining that. It doesn't matter. It's not relevant to the story. And you find yourself caught in a time loop trying to figure out how to stop this star of your solar system going supernova, right?
Mhm.
And you can die, and you will, over and over and over again, either by making a mistake, because it's a first person platformer to a certain extent,
Mhm.
and falling into a black hole, or crashing your ship, or, whatever. There's a million ways to die. Or the supernova happens at about the 15-minute mark, right? And so if you haven't figured out what is causing the supernova by that point, it goes supernova and you start over again.
Okay.
It's visually just like the Return of the Obra Dinn, very fun, very striking in terms of the way it looks, the technology about how you take off from one planet and then can go and land on another planet. And it's all completely seamless. Is very, very cool. The world feels very cohesive, very complete. So, you take off from your landing pad on your home planet, you go land on another planet, and then you can dive into the planet's core and completely explore it. And there's no loading screens, there's no hiccups, no nothing. It is completely seamless. It's very
Hmm.
cool. Um, it is a time loop game, and my problem with all time loop games is you end up seeing the beginning of the game far more than you see the end of the game because you're always resetting to the beginning and you always have to go through the same 5 or 6 steps just to continue on with your progress, right?
Mhm.
So you die, so you always have to go back up to the launch pad, get back into the ship, put on your suit, take off, fly to whatever planet you want to go to, and then you can resume what you were doing 30 seconds ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my biggest complaint with the game right now is that it really needed a quick restart option. So there are times where I've got myself trapped in a location that I can't get out of, right?
Mhm.
Or I find myself like thrown off into space and there's nothing I can do. And I could just sit there waiting for my oxygen to wear out or wait for the star to go supernova. But it would
Oh,
but what I
yeah.
end up doing is to just quit and go back to the title screen because that resets the
Yeah.
time loop if you do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And since I'm doing that, it just stands to reason. Like, why don't you just have a quick restart button, right? Just a kill me now button. Um, but they don't. And so that I think is my biggest complaint is having to go all the way back to the title screen just to restart the time loop.
So
Otherwise, it's been really fun to explore and really interesting to sort of discover everything that's going on in the world.
I know, and this is not a complete one-to-one fair comparison, but when you told me about the time loop and all that stuff, it reminded me of Majora's Mask.
Mm-hmm.
So does Majora's Mask do it better as
Mm-hmm.
far as the time loop's concerned? Because you can kind of reset or
In my opinion, yes, Majora's Mask does it better for a variety of
yeah.
reasons. Majora's Mask has a lot more flexibility. You can speed up time, you can slow down time,
Hmm.
you can restart the cycle whenever you want to. There's fast
Yeah,
travel warp points, so
yeah,
you don't have to
yeah.
always be flying to particular locations. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I was thinking about Majora's Mask today while playing it and the similarities
Hmm.
between the two and how they handle time, the time loop,
Yeah.
system. And Majora's Mask 100% does it better. Like there is no
Hmm.
component of Outer Wilds that is better than what Nintendo did with Majora's Mask back in like 19 or 2001.
That's
Um,
crazy.
and really, it's just about the ease with which you can get into the world. Like I said,
Hmm.
the biggest frustration beyond not having a quick reset is the fact that every time the time loop starts, you don't have a choice. There are 6 steps that you have to take before you can get back into space and start exploring again, right? And I've at this point gone up to the launch pad, launched my ship 100, 150 times. I don't know, um, and it's kind of boring to do that. It would be really nice that if at some point I could get a fast travel system where you can just press a button and it tells you which place you want to fast travel to. You warp to that location, and then you're off to the races. And I understand from a conceit standpoint that one of the novelties of the game is your ability to fly through this entire solar system seamlessly, and adding a fast travel option
Hmm.
somewhat dilutes that experience that they're going with. But in my opinion, what would you rather have? Like maintaining the verisimilitude of your world or fun? And from my standpoint, I always land on the side of fun, right?
Hmm.
Especially given how unrealistic the world is from the standpoint of just scope of it. The scope of the solar system is small just to make the game work, right? Instead of taking 6 weeks to travel between the planet and the moon, it takes 10 seconds to get from the main planet to the planet's moon, right? And so
Hmm.
there's a lot of concessions done for the sake of gameplay, and I feel like some of these warp options that Majora's Mask have would have gone a long way to making the game even better in my mind. That being said,
Have
I've really really enjoyed it to this point.
yeah, so even with all those nitpicks, you're enjoying that game. It's
Mm-hmm.
funny. I have Obra Dinn on my Switch. It's just
Mm-hmm.
sitting in my library. I haven't got to it yet, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. I mean, as far as the reviews are concerned, stuff like that. So I've been wanting to try it out. It's disappointing that you kind of got to a point where you kind of hit the eject button. I'll see what happens when I
Yeah.
play myself. Curious about that. But Outer Wilds, I've heard really good things about as well. I just haven't added that to my library just yet, considering every other game that um, you and I both have in our stack of games sitting on a shelf, just collecting dust digitally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is one of those situations where I could just wait for you to tell me about it, and then if it's worth picking up on a sale or something like that, then maybe I will. But yeah, so far, sounds like so far so good with Outer Wilds. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, of the two, I prefer Outer Wilds to
Hmm.
Obra Dinn, no hands down. I appreciate the fact that a single person made the Return of the Obra Dinn. The
Hmm.
music is
Yeah,
actually really good. I really dig the music. And the ideas are very, very cool. Really, really like
hmm,
the ideas, but the puzzle construction was, in my
a little
opinion,
bit. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, for
Hmm.
me, like so Cyan recently re-released, remade and remastered Riven,
Hmm.
and they I obviously I played the game when it came out back in 1997, but they had gone through, simplified a lot of the puzzles, reworked a lot of the puzzles, and it was that to me is the standard bearer in terms of
Hmm.
difficulty, puzzle difficulty versus players' ability to get through it, right? I
Riven,
managed, yeah,
sorry, Riven was the sequel to Mist, isn't that right?
that's right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah.
And in the original Riven, there were some puzzles that were just like the Return of the Obra Dinn, incomprehensible, right? You look them up
Hmm.
and you're like, how the hell was anybody supposed to figure that out?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but in the sequel, um, I got through the whole game without using an FAQ. I managed to solve, and
Hmm.
some of them were just really hard. But when you
Hmm.
figured it out, you're like, oh, I get it. I totally understand
Yeah,
how I was
yeah.
supposed to come to this, you know. Um,
You get an assisted light bulb moment.
yeah, yeah. Whereas again with Obra Dinn, I gave up after about 40%, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
going through it and finding all the people's names, I was like looking at all of my notes and everything that I'd written down and everything that was provided for you in the game, and I'm like, I have no idea how I was ever supposed to figure
Yeah,
that out, you know.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
the real difference in my opinion.
Hmm.
And there aren't really any puzzles in the Outer Wilds. The Outer Wilds is really more of
Yeah,
an exploration game.
yeah, yeah.
Obra Dinn is without a doubt a puzzle game in the same sense that Riven was a puzzle game, right?
Hmm.
Um, and Riven does it 1,000%, 1,500% better than the Return of the Obra Dinn. Now, admittedly,
Hmm.
Riven is there's an entire team at Cyan who's
Yeah,
working on this
yeah,
project with a complete test team and all this stuff. And I have to emphasize that the Return of the Obra Dinn was done by a single person, and in that
yeah.
respect, by itself, it's an unbelievably remarkable project. But
It's funny. I've been sitting on it for a while myself because of the visuals for the game. I mean, because
mm-hmm,
it's just such a throwback to almost Apple IIe, except for black and white days. And so I wanted to
mm-hmm,
play it for that reason alone. But there's enough there. It sounds like even with some of the negatives that you may have for the game, I'm looking forward to playing it eventually. Yeah, that's good.
no, yeah. One of the things I will say about the game is that there comes a point at which you can choose to end the game, whether you've solved all the puzzles or not. So I do
Hmm.
like that it gives you the option to go, okay, I'm good enough. I'm going to go ahead and do this and just,
Hmm.
and just see how well you did. And I
Hmm.
think that to a certain extent there was some intention that you wouldn't be able to solve it your first try, and it would tell you, yes, this was right, no, this wasn't right, etc., etc.
Hmm.
But I think forcing you to replay the whole game and fill in the blanks using trial and error is a not a good way to pad your gameplay experience, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But be that as it may, I highly recommend giving it a try. Whether you beat it or not, just living in that world and interacting with that world for a little bit is really cool. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Well, there was a game I was gonna talk to, but we'll save it for next week.
Okay.
But I've been playing Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown,
I've heard good things about that one.
and they're all the good things are correct. I mean, I agree with the masses on this one. It's an excellent Metroidvania game, but more. I mean, I'm only about 5 hours in, but
Mm-hmm.
so jury's still out, sort of. But so far, I am almost shocked at how much I'm enjoying the game. It's been I went into it jaded because, of course, Ubisoft, who's been their name's been raked through the mud countless times at this
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
in the past 10 years. I didn't trust them as a publisher, but this particular team, the game, rock solid. It's great so far. But we'll talk about it more next week. I was gonna try to wrap up here where we're at here, unless you got more to say about Obra Dinn or Outer Wilds.
I feel like I've said my piece at this point, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, so one thing I wanted to kind of show you just for fun,
Mm-hmm.
is show you the original storyboard and then where I ended up with the quote unquote rough animation slash final animation
Mm-hmm.
for fun. But here we have the chicken scratch storyboard. I just kind of do with the animatic. So we have the warhog recovering from smashing into the counter, and I'll play it through. and then Calamity lands on it, and then leaves and goes into complete
Mm-hmm.
mayhem. But then we have the color version of it now, and I'll play that through. So he recovers, boom, ah! And then takes off. So I think we got pretty much everything for this shot. I mean, one thing this is a nice to have, but it's not important, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think. Um, Based on your reaction as an audience member and you were laughing, that's good. But see this pose right here? I wanted
Yeah.
to kind of do this drawing, but it only lasts for 5 frames. Is it worth it for me to do that? That's the question you always have as an animator.
Yeah.
I guess not, because I got a laugh out of the writer's room. So I think I'll just live with that because it's so fast, and I cheated it with just moving the current asset out of the frame and
Yeah.
going into the next frame. So, anyways, any thoughts on your side that you see?
Um. Ugh, sorry. No, it happens so fast. You don't even notice the continuity change, honestly. Like we don't have a shot of the warhog changing position, but
Yeah.
I didn't even notice it from the one cut to the next cut.
Hmm.
Um the 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 momentum of the warhog backing out of frame to frame right and then him entering from frame left, that
Hmm.
to me was enough of a continuity connection that it didn't bother me at all.
Cool. Well, I guess I'll move on then. If
All
that's the
right.
case, I won't bother doing that extra drawing. Although I just find it comedically. I mean, I just find it funny to draw. I would love to draw it.
Yeah, 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 for
I think it's
sure.
just funny. But yeah, I'll move on at this point and move on to the next shot, which will probably be this next shot here. I'll do the final art here. I'll turn off
S-
the color stuff
Yeah.
here too.
So one thing I'm
Yeah.
noticing is the warhog not have any hooves.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll put the yeah, but this is a sketch version, and then
Okay.
also this version is just a bar drawing from here,
Oh, I
which we don't
gotcha.
need the hooves. Yeah, that's all it was. But yes, it'll have definitely we'll have the warhog with hooves. No worries. Don't
All
fret.
right, all right.
Don't no worries on
I
that.
just saw that.
Yep, yep, yep.
All
It's
right,
a astute observation, but we
all
will take
right.
care of it.
Excellent.
But
Well,
yeah,
we'll
so we're
call
in
it.
good shape.
Yeah, we'll call it there. Next time we see everybody, it'll be 2025. Which is, every year it happens at the same time every year, and every year I'm always shocked at how quickly the years pass these days. Um,
Yeah.
but there we are. So we're gonna call it as always. Head on over to calamityjane.rocks. That'll take you to our Patreon site. Please consider subscribing and helping us make this cartoon a reality. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube, which presumably you already have since you're watching the stream. We're also on Instagram. We'll do something with Instagram eventually. Right now, it's sort of just another repository, another place for you to go and find a link to the streams. But in the meantime, Happy New Year, everybody. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.